The wilderness guide's radio crackled with panic. Get her out of there now. But Sophia remained frozen at the edge of the river, ignoring the frantic warnings. Across the rushing water, an enormous brown bear had spotted her. The massive predator stood on its hind legs, towering over 7 feet tall, its scarred muzzle testing the air. The research team documenting Sophia's journey scrambled for their tranquilizer guns, certain they were about to witness disaster. 12 years earlier, Sophia had bottle-fed the same bear as a starving cub, slept with it curled against her small body, taught it to fish in her family's pond, until wildlife authorities discovered their illegal bond and forcibly reintroduced the growing bear to this remote wilderness. Sophia had spent years fighting for permission to find her childhood companion, facing ridicule from wildlife experts who insisted the bear would now see her as nothing but prey. Yet as the massive creature splashed across the river toward her, something extraordinary happened. The bear dropped to all fours, then lowered its head submissively. With the gentleness of handling porcelain, it extended its massive paw, touching the small birthmark on Sophia's wrist that it used to nuzzle as a cub. The research cameras captured the impossible, tears streaming down the bear's face as it recognized a human who had once been its entire world. Some bonds transcend the boundaries that nature and science have established. Sophia Petrov's relationship with Kaska, a Kodiak bear she raised from cubhood, represents perhaps the most extraordinary human-animal connection ever documented. For 7 formative years, Sophia and Kaska shared home meals and a profound connection that defied conventional understanding of cross-species relationships. Their forced separation in 2011 was supposed to be permanent, with wildlife experts unanimously agreeing that Kaska would quickly revert to wild instincts, erasing any memory of her human family. Yet exactly 12 years later, their reunion in Alaska's remote Kodiak wilderness challenged everything we thought we knew about animal cognition, emotional memory, and the lasting impact of early bonds. What happened that day didn't just surprise onlookers. It fundamentally altered scientific understanding of wildlife behavior. The footage, which has now been viewed over 300 million times, shows something experts had declared impossible: a fully wild apex predator recognizing, remembering, and emotionally responding to a human from its past. This is a story of how a little girl and a bear cub grew up together, were torn apart, and found each other again in a moment that continues to stun wildlife biologists, neurologists, and anyone who witnesses it. The spring of 2004 brought torrential rains to the remote Alaskan peninsula, where the Petrov family maintained their wildlife research station. Sophia's parents, Doctors Mikhail and Elena Petrov, renowned wildlife biologists specializing in large predator behavior, were tracking the movements of a female Kodiak bear and her 2 cubs when disaster struck. A flash flood swept through a narrow canyon, claiming the mother bear's life and one of her cubs. The researchers found the surviving cub, barely 8 weeks old, clinging to a fallen tree, severely malnourished and fighting for survival. We had 2 choices, Dr. Elena Petrov later explained in her controversial memoir, Beyond Boundaries: leave the cub to almost certain death or intervene. The nearest wildlife rehabilitation center was understaffed and overflowed with orphan cubs that season. They'd already turned away 3 rescues that month. The decision to bring the cub to their research cabin was meant to be temporary. Sophia, just 6 years old at the time, was immediately enchanted by the trembling ball of fur her parents carried through the door. I still remember the way Kaska looked at me, Sophia recalled in her first interview after the reunion. She was so small and scared, but there was this recognition, even then, like we were always meant to find each other. What began as emergency care evolved into something far more complex. The wildlife authorities' delayed response stretched from days into weeks. During this time, Kaska bonded with Sophia in ways that surprised even her biologist parents. The cub refused food from anyone else, followed Sophia everywhere, and slept curled against her at night. When officials finally arranged transport to a rehabilitation facility 3 weeks later, Kaska's distress was so severe, refusing food and self-harming, that veterinarians made an unprecedented recommendation. For the cub's survival, she needed to stay with a human child who would become her emotional anchor. This controversial exception would require strict protocols, extensive documentation, and would change the Petrov family's lives forever. Life with a growing bear cub transformed the Petrov family's research station into something between a scientific laboratory and an unconventional nursery. The first year established rhythms that would define their shared existence. Sophia and Kaska rising with the Alaskan sun, Dr. Elena documenting their interactions with meticulous scientific precision, and Dr. Mikhail designing increasingly sturdy enclosures as Kaska rapidly outgrew her initial sleeping crate. By her first birthday, Kaska had already reached 180 pounds, yet retained a puppy-like playfulness that perfectly matched Sophia's boundless energy. Their mornings began with Sophia reading aloud from picture books, while Kaska listened with what appeared to be genuine interest, her dark eyes tracking the colorful images. She had favorites, Sophia would later explain. She would grunt and paw at the books about fish or forests, but seemed bored with anything about cities or cars. Their communication evolved into something extraordinary, a private language of gestures, sounds, and expressions that neither the Petrovs nor visiting researchers could fully decode. Sophia instinctively understood when Kaska was hungry, playful, or seeking comfort, while Kaska demonstrated remarkable restraint in physical interactions, seeming to understand her growing strength. We observed behaviors that contradicted established understanding of ursine development, noted Dr. Elena in her research journals. Kaska exhibited problem-solving skills and emotional responses more complex than anything documented in bears of similar age. Sophia's childhood unfolded unlike any other. While children her age attended kindergarten and arranged playdates, Sophia learned mathematics by helping calculate Kaska's dietary needs and developed social skills through carefully supervised interactions between Kaska and the family sled dogs. Her toys became enrichment tools for Kaska, and her bedtime stories were often about famous bears from literature. The most remarkable development came when Sophia experienced childhood nightmares. Without training, Kaska began to detect these episodes before they fully manifested, gently waking Sophia by pressing her nose against the girl's hand, a behavior that would later become their signature greeting, and ultimately, the gesture that would confirm their recognition 12 years later in the wild. By 2011, the reality of their situation became impossible to ignore. Kaska had grown into a magnificent 700-pound Kodiak bear, beautiful, intelligent, and increasingly difficult to manage within the confines of even the most generous enclosure. Though her bond with Sophia, now 13, remained extraordinary, a series of inevitable incidents raised alarm bells among wildlife authorities monitoring the unusual arrangement. The first warning came when Kaska accidentally broke through the reinforced cabin door while trying to follow Sophia to her homeschool lesson. Dr. Mikhail recounted. Then there was the day she unintentionally knocked Sophia down during play. Sophia wasn't hurt, but the potential for disaster was clear to everyone. The legal situation also reached a breaking point. The Petrov Special Research Permit was contingent on Kaska's eventual reintroduction to wild, a milestone that had already been delayed several times through appeals and extensions. When the Alaska Department of Fish and Wildlife delivered their final decision, the family had just 2 weeks to prepare for the separation. Those 14 days became a careful choreography of gradual distancing and preparation. Wildlife reintroduction specialists worked with Sophia to teach Kaska essential survival skills, finding edible plants, fishing techniques, and avoiding human settlements. Each session ended with Sophia retreating earlier, staying farther away, preparing both herself and Kaska for the inevitable. The morning of separation arrived with heavy fog, shrouding the Kodiak wilderness. Sophia was permitted one final goodbye, a moment captured in a single, heartbreaking photograph that would later become the cover image of Dr. Elena's book. In it, Sophia presses her forehead to Kaska's massive muzzle, tears streaming down her face, while the bear gently holds her hand with surprising delicacy. Kaska was transported by helicopter to a remote region of the Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge, fitted with a tracking collar, and released into an area known for abundant salmon and minimal human contact. The last image the Petrovs received was Kaska disappearing into the mist-covered forest, looking back just once at the helicopter carrying away her human family. While Kaska adapted to her ancestral wilderness, Sophia embarked on her own journey of transformation. The quietness of the research station after Kaska's departure proved unbearable for the teenager, prompting the Petrov family's difficult decision to relocate to Anchorage. There, Sophia struggled to navigate the unfamiliar terrain of public high school, a world far more confusing than predictable patterns of bear behavior she had studied her entire life. "I didn't know how to be around people my age," Sophia revealed in her TED Talk, which has now garnered over 20 million views. "I understood predator behavior better than teenage social cues. My classmates had inside jokes. I had extensive knowledge of salmon migration patterns and bear hibernation cycles." Despite these challenges, Sophia's unique background eventually became her strength. Her personal essay about Casca helped secure her admission to Cornell University's prestigious wildlife biology program, where she specialized in ursine cognition and memory. By her graduation in 2020, Sophia had already published 2 peer-reviewed papers challenging conventional understanding of bear intelligence, work directly inspired by her experiences with Casca. Meanwhile, Casca's tracking collar provided sporadic updates for 3 years before finally failing. Wildlife officials conducted occasional aerial surveys, identifying a bear matching Casca's distinctive chest marking in a territory approximately 40 miles from her release point. Reports suggested she had successfully integrated into the wild population, with possible cubs sighted in her company during the 2017 salmon run. The 12-year gap between separation and reunion wasn't arbitrary. Sophia had sought permission for a monitored encounter multiple times over the years, each request denied by wildlife authorities, citing concerns about human safety and the potential disruption to Casca's wild behavior. The breakthrough came when Sophia's research gained international attention, leading to a documentary proposal that finally convinced officials to approve a controlled reunion. With extensive safety protocols and the understanding that this would provide unprecedented scientific data on long-term memory in wild bears. 12 years is significant, Dr. Elena noted. It represents nearly 2/3 of Casca's life spent entirely in the wild, long enough, according to every existing study, for any domesticated behaviors or human recognition to be completely erased. The expedition to find Casca began in June 2023, coinciding with the Alaskan salmon run, a time when bears congregate at rivers, increasing the chances of locating one specific animal in the vast wilderness. The team assembled for this unprecedented venture included Sophia, her parents, 2 wildlife conservation officers, a documentary crew, and Dr. Nathan Calloway, the foremost expert on bear cognition, who had publicly criticized the reunion attempt as dangerous sentimentality masquerading as science. Finding one particular bear in over 3,500 square miles of remote terrain is like searching for a specific snowflake in an avalanche, explained Tomas Reynolds, the lead tracker for the expedition. Even with Casca's last known territory as a starting point, we were essentially gambling with extremely long odds. The search itself presented formidable challenges. The team spent 18 grueling days trekking through dense underbrush, setting up observation points along riverbanks, and deploying camera traps in areas with recent bear activity. DNA analysis of collected fur samples eliminated 7 bears before they even had visual confirmation of Casca. Frustration mounted as the expedition's permitted time window began to close. Throughout the search, Dr. Calloway maintained his skeptical stance. "What we're attempting contradicts everything we know about wild bear behavior," he reminded the team during their nightly briefings. "A bear that has spent 12 years in the wild won't just remember a human from its past. It will either avoid human contact entirely or treat humans as it would any other potential threat or food source." Even Sophia began to doubt as days passed without success. The scientific community largely agreed with Dr. Calloway. The Casca that Sophia knew had likely disappeared years ago, replaced by pure wild instinct. Several prominent biologists had publicly staked their reputations on the prediction that even if they found Casca, there would be zero recognition, calling the expedition a waste of resources that endangers both the researchers and the bear's wild adaptations. The breakthrough came on the 19th day, when a local bush pilot reported spotting a large female bear with a distinctive chest marking near a river just outside their search grid, a location nobody had predicted Casca would establish territory. Dawn broke with a heavy mist clinging to the valley as the team made their final approach to coordinates provided by the bush pilot. They traveled in tense silence, every step carefully measured, every sense alert to the dangers of entering an apex predator's territory. Sophia walked at the center of the formation, her heart thundering against her ribs, clutching a worn leather pouch containing the small wooden toy Casca had chewed as a cub. "The river clearing is just ahead," whispered Reynolds, the tracker. "If she's still here, that's where we'll find her." The research team established a perimeter at a safe distance, cameras rolling, tranquilizer rifles at the ready. Dr. Calloway insisted that Sophia remain with the main group, but she negotiated a compromise. She would advance alone to the river's edge, but no farther, with a safety team positioned behind natural cover 20 yards back. The waiting stretched for 3 excruciating hours. Birds returned to their normal activities. The occasional splash of salmon punctuated the silence. Then, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The small woodland creatures fell silent. On the opposite bank, branches swayed and parted. She appeared like a ghost materializing from the forest, larger than Sophia remembered, her coat gleaming chestnut in the dappled sunlight, muscles rippling beneath her fur as she approached the water's edge. The massive bear stood motionless, testing the air with her sensitive nose. "Casca," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. The bear's head snapped up, eyes locking directly on Sophia across the rushing water. For one breathless moment, the world suspended. The wildlife officers raised their rifles slightly. Dr. Calloway muttered something about maintaining position. Then, defying every expectation, Casca entered the water, not with the charge of a predator, but with deliberate, careful movements. She crossed the river with purpose, water cascading from her massive frame as she emerged on Sophia's side. The entire research team tensed, ready to intervene. 20 feet from Sophia, Casca stopped. She lowered herself to all fours, then did something that caused Dr. Calloway to drop his notebook in shock. She extended her right palm up and made a soft chuffing sound that Sophia had not heard in 12 years. What happened next left even the most skeptical expert speechless. Sophia extended her hand, palm down, fingers slightly curled, an exact greeting gesture she had taught Casca as a cub. Without hesitation, the massive bear gently touched her paw to Sophia's birthmark, then pressed her forehead to Sophia's palm. It was their childhood ritual, perfectly preserved after 12 years apart. In 30 years of studying bear behavior, I've never seen anything remotely like it, Dr. Calloway later admitted in the documentary. Wild bears simply don't behave this way with humans. They don't retain specific greeting rituals. They don't approach with such purposeful gentleness. And they absolutely don't demonstrate recognition of individuals after over a decade of separation. Most shocking to the scientific team was Casca's body language, the complete absence of stress indicators typically present when bears encounter humans. Her ears remained forward, not flattened defensively. She maintained relaxed facial muscles rather than the tense preparation for aggression. Perhaps most telling was a continuous soft vocalization she directed specifically toward Sophia, a sound that acoustic analysis later confirmed matched recordings from their early years together. This fundamentally challenges our understanding of memory formation in large mammals, observed Dr. Eliza Thornton, neurobiologist and consultant to the expedition. The prevailing consensus has been that survival instincts eventually override early imprinting in apex predators. Casca has essentially rewritten our textbooks. The footage of Sophia and Casca's reunion triggered an immediate paradigm shift across multiple scientific disciplines. Within weeks, research teams worldwide began re-examining long-held assumptions about animal cognition, emotional memory, and interspecies bonding. The moment when Casca performed her childhood greeting ritual, captured in crystal-clear 4K video that eliminated any possibility of misinterpretation, became the most analyzed few seconds in wildlife biology history. We've been profoundly wrong about the durability of early memories in large predators, admitted Dr. Calloway in his revised paper published in Nature. This single case has invalidated decades of assumptions about the impermanence of human-wildlife bonds when those bonds form during critical developmental periods. Neurologists identify particular significance in the way Casca's recognition manifested, not as simple familiarity, but as complex emotional memory complete with specific behavioral patterns that had lain dormant for 12 years. This sparked a wave of comparative studies examining memory retention across species previously believed to lack such capabilities. The Casca Protocol, as it became known, inspired research initiatives on 3 continents. At Oxford University, researchers began a longitudinal study of rehabilitated orphan elephants to test for similar recognition patterns. In Japan, primatologists established new methodologies for assessing long-term memory in great apes separated from human caregivers. The University of British Columbia launched the Petrov Initiative, dedicated to examining whether early cross-species bonds create permanent neural pathways distinct from those formed within same-species relationships. Perhaps most significantly, the reunion challenged a fundamental divide between emotion-based and science-based approaches to wildlife conservation. We've traditionally dismissed emotional bonds between humans and wild animals as anthropomorphism, noted Dr. Elena Petrov in her address to the International Wildlife Conservation Congress. But Casca's case suggests these connections may have biological reality, deserving scientific respect. The question is no longer whether these bonds exist, but how they function and what they mean for our understanding of animal consciousness. For wildlife rehabilitation experts, the implications were immediate and practical, prompting a global reassessment of release protocols and post-release monitoring for animals raised with human contact. Following the momentous encounter, wildlife authorities established unprecedented protocols allowing for what they termed limited controlled interaction between Sophia and Casca. Twice yearly, under strict supervision and extensive safety measures, Sophia is permitted to visit the periphery of Casca's territory. These visits last no more than 30 minutes and maintain specific distance requirements that have gradually relaxed as the interactions consistently prove peaceful. We're not encouraging a return to their previous relationship, clarified Regional Wildlife Director Amelia Harrison. Rather, we're documenting a unique natural phenomenon while ensuring both human safety and the bear's continued wild existence. For Sophia, the reunion transformed both her personal life and professional trajectory. She established the Casca Foundation, which funds research on animal cognition and advocates for more nuanced wildlife management policies. Her graduate work has expanded to include developing new methods for assessing memory and emotional processing in large predators. I don't pretend we're returning to our childhood relationship, Sophia explained during a research conference. Casca is a wild bear living a wild bear's life, as she should be, but our connection remains, existing in a space science is just beginning to understand. Casca herself continues to thrive in her territory, now equipped with a next-generation tracking collar that monitors her movements, health metrics, and interaction with other bears. Researchers have noted fascinating behavioral patterns. She maintains a larger-than-typical buffer zone around hiking trails, shows no interest in camp food or garbage, behaviors that often lead to bear-human conflicts, and appears to actively avoid other humans while making exceptions to the research teams that include Sophia. Most remarkably, in 2024, wildlife cameras captured Casca leading 2 cubs to the river clearing during one of Sophia's scheduled visits, a gesture of trust that left even the most hardened researchers visibly moved. Sophia and Casca's story transcend the boundaries of conventional wildlife science, speaking to something deeper about connection that resonates across species lines. Their bond, forged in the intimacy of shared childhood and preserved through 12 years of separation and wildness, challenges our fundamental understanding of what relationships can endure. It stands as living proof that connection can exist in forms far more profound than we have allowed ourselves to believe possible. Some bonds are meant to be fully explained, Sophia reflected in her memoir's closing pages. They can only be experienced, honored, and protected. This philosophy now guides a new generation of wildlife biologists approaching their work with both scientific rigor and a newfound respect for the emotional lives of the animals they study. Perhaps the most powerful legacy of Sophia and Casca's reunion is the questions it continues to raise. If a wild bear can retain such precise memories of human connection, what other capabilities might we be overlooking in the creatures with whom we share this planet? How might this reshape our approach to conservation, to rehabilitation, to the very way we define the boundaries between human and wild? The story of the girl who grew up with a bear, and the bear who remembered her, reminds us that the natural world still holds mystery science is only beginning to unravel. If you've been moved by Sophia and Casca's extraordinary journey, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel for the full documentary series, including exclusive footage of their seasonal reunions and updates on the groundbreaking research their story has inspired. Each new subscriber helps fund ongoing conservation efforts and supports the Casca Foundation's work protecting bear habitats worldwide. Join our community today and be part of this remarkable continuing story.